If you don't take the blame, your sister will be prosecuted. And from now on, we are no longer a family. My father said that in the conference room on the 12th floor, where a photo of him shaking hands with the state governor 3 years ago hangs on the wall, I stood in the glass-walled room overlooking a parking lot full of shoppers. An hour earlier, the press had reported on a batch of food recalled due to incorrect ingredient labeling. Rachel's name was on the email approving the promotional campaign, but in the internal report, my name was listed as the one responsible. I didn't sign any documents. But the system shows that I was the final approver. People say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes that same blood makes it hard to breathe. Family is supposed to protect you. But if your family asks you to be the shield, what would you do? Before I go on, I want to know where you are listening to this story. On a quiet evening, or in the middle of thoughts you haven't said out loud. Leave a comment so I know you are here with me. And if you've ever taken the blame for someone else, swallowed something you didn't do, please stay until the end. Because this story will not end the way they planned. I turned back to the conference table. My father was still sitting there, his hand resting on a stack of documents, his thumb tapping lightly against the cover as if waiting for me to sign an invisible page. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His voice was low and steady, the same tone he used when announcing quarterly profits to shareholders. Rachel sat to his right, mascara slightly smudged at the corner of her eye. She wouldn't look at me. Her hands were clasped in her lap, freshly painted dark red nails trembling. I had seen her shake like that as a child whenever she was afraid of getting a bad grade in math. Back then, I was always the one who told our father that a test was just a number. My mother stood there, gripping the strap of her Chanel bag so tightly, her knuckles turned white, her eyes avoiding mine. "It's just taking responsibility for communications, Maddie," she said softly. "No one is going to jail. You're stronger than your sister. System logs don't lie, but they can be altered." At 2:14 a.m., to him, I handed him the key. He used it to him. I handed him the key he used to lock my wrists. I wasn't working at 2:14 a.m. that night. I was at home watching the Cleveland Browns game with Caleb over FaceTime. I remember clearly because the team lost by a narrow margin and I turned off the TV before the final quarter ended. "The system logs can't be wrong," Mark, the head of IT, said, eyes fixed on his screen. I looked at the admin-level string of characters in the upper right corner. Only 2 people knew the top-tier password, me and my father. A silence passed. No one mentioned that. "I need access to the backup," I said. My father exhaled lightly, as if I had just made things more complicated than necessary. "Don't make this bigger than it needs to be," he said. "We're about to go public. A small mistake isn't worth tearing the whole family apart." Family. The word hung in the cold, air-conditioned room. I removed my name tag from my lapel, the small metal plate engraved with integrity first. I had kept it since my first day working at store number 3 when I was a sophomore at Ohio State. I slipped it into my coat pocket, hearing the faint click of metal against the zipper. This integrity first name tag has been with me since those early days at store number 3. It's not just metal, it's my honor. Do you have something you've kept? A small object tied to your self-respect or a difficult chapter of your life? Share it with me. "I'll review all the data," I said. Rachel finally looked up. Her eyes weren't pleading, just one unspoken question. "What are you going to do?" I left the conference room before anyone could call security. The glass door closed behind me, reflecting a woman I had never looked at this closely before. My phone vibrated in my hand as I stepped into the elevator. A message from an unknown number. "Don't trust the system logs. They deleted the most important thing." The elevator stopped at the ground floor. The doors opened and the smell of coffee from the lobby cafe was so familiar I almost forgot I had just been handed an ultimatum. I walked straight out to the parking lot. The early spring wind in Ohio was still cold, slipping through the collar of my coat. The message was still on my screen, but I didn't open it again. Right now, I wasn't thinking about who sent it. I was thinking about Rachel. I had worked double shifts at store number 3 so Rachel could fly to Chicago for her summer marketing program. Back then, my father said the company didn't have the budget to support both daughters. I chose to stay. At night, I restocked frozen shelves past midnight and still showed up for class the next morning. Rachel sent me a photo by Lake Michigan with the message, "I'll never forget this." Last year, the organic product campaign failed, sales dropped, a supplier canceled the contract. Rachel was in charge of communications. But during the executive meeting, I stood up and took responsibility for the flawed market analysis. I said I had misjudged customer demand. My father nodded. Rachel didn't have to explain a single word. I opened my car door and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. The Integrity First name tag pressed lightly against my chest from inside my coat pocket. I took it out and placed it on the steering wheel. The small metal plate reflected the pale afternoon sunlight. 10 years ago, as a sophomore, I wore it for the first time with a simple pride, doing my job right. Rachel once told me, late at night after a failed meeting, "You're always the one who fixes things." I laughed then. I thought it was a compliment. Now those words came back like a cut. I went back into the building without warning. The receptionist looked briefly confused as I walked straight toward the marketing office. Rachel was there, sitting alone in front of a dark screen, her hands gripping her head. I dropped the name tag onto her wooden desk. The sharp sound was a declaration. The protection ends here. "Do you really want me to take this one too?" I asked. Not a threat, just a question. Rachel looked up. Her eyes were redder than before. She opened her mouth, then closed it, looked at the name tag, looked at me, then turned away. Rachel stayed silent, the silence of someone who knows she's being cowardly. I didn't wait for an explanation. I knew that if I stepped in again, the price wouldn't just be my reputation. If I stopped, something would break. I picked up the name tag, slipped it back into my pocket, and for the first time, I didn't walk into a meeting to fix my sister's mistake. In that moment, I wondered if I was being too cruel to my own sister. Should I keep protecting Rachel like I have for years, or is it time for her to face the storm herself? I truly want to hear your thoughts. I didn't leave the parking lot. I drove around to the back of the building where the old warehouse entrance and server room are. In the evenings, maintenance usually leaves early. I still had my access card to the technical area, even though my system privileges had been revoked. The server room was colder than the rest of the building. The fans hummed steadily. I sat at a metal table beside the equipment racks and opened my personal laptop. I didn't try logging into the main system again. I searched for the automatic weekly backups, something few people think about when rushing to edit data. It took nearly 10 minutes to download the files. The cursor blinked across the screen. I scrolled through access logs comparing timestamps. 2:14 a.m. again. But in the older backup, beneath the final approval line, there was another entry. A secondary account with the highest level of authority in the company. That account is only used for deep system intervention. That authority belongs to my father. I sat up straight. My heart pounded, but my hands no longer shook as I typed. Not because I wanted to believe it, but because the numbers in front of me don't lie. I didn't run up to the 12th floor. I didn't call to confront him. I dialed Caleb instead. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Can access logs be altered?" There was a brief silence on the other end. "Yes," Caleb replied. "If someone has the highest level authority, they can edit or overwrite it to make someone else appear as the approver." I summarized what I had just found. Caleb asked me to send screenshots. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. He sent me another image captured from the system before he left the company during his final security audit. In that image, at 2:14 a.m., the name Rachel Carter was clearly listed as the final approver. I placed the two images side by side, one current, one before the edits. "Data. There's something else," Caleb said. "Data. There's something else," Caleb said quietly. "That timing matches when the company filed financial documents to prepare for going public. If this scandal breaks before the offering, the valuation will crash. I ended the call and sat alone in the freezing server room. The recall wasn't just about incorrect labeling, it was a piece of a much bigger picture. My phone vibrated again. An internal email announced an urgent meeting regarding the stock offering plan. I read the subject line and for the first time understood this wasn't about a single name in a log. The next morning, my name appeared on the local news. Not in a business achievement segment, not in a feature about one of the state's long-standing families, but in the scrolling headline, Director of Analysis at Carter Fresh Markets takes responsibility for recalled shipment. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters called, a radio host left a voicemail asking for an interview. The company's Facebook page flooded with comments. Some demanded my resignation. Some asked how a family business could allow such a mistake. I walked into the office without looking at the news screen mounted in the lobby. The receptionist avoided my eyes. Some employees lowered their heads. Some watched me pass. No one asked directly, but I knew they had seen the headlines. 10 minutes later, my mother called me into a small meeting room next to my father's office. "You should take a few weeks off," she said, resting her hand lightly on the edge of the table as if suggesting a vacation. "Just to ease the pressure, things will calm down." Take time off sounds softer than step aside, but it means the same. I tried logging into the internal system, error. My access had been disabled. I looked at my mother. She didn't meet my eyes. "You're stronger than Rachel," she said quietly. "You can handle it." The room fell silent. The air conditioner hummed. Outside the glass wall, employees moved about as usual. Some families believe the strongest one should carry the most weight. But when the strongest one lets go, what does the structure reveal? I walked out of the meeting room without promising anything. No argument, no signing a leave request. In the main lobby, the company slogan still glowed on the wall: "Integrity first." I stopped in the middle of the flow of people, took the name tag out of my pocket. Madeline Carter, Integrity first. I removed the metal pin and placed the tag on the reception desk. A small sound, but enough for the receptionist to look up. "I'm not going anywhere. The one who did wrong is the one who should leave." I turned and walked straight toward my office. The glass door reflected me in a simple gray suit. No longer the sister shielding someone, not yet the winner. But I knew one thing. If they needed a sacrifice, I would not step onto the altar. I returned to my office, even though my main access was locked. The computer wouldn't let me into the internal system, but I still had last week's exported reports on my personal drive. I opened each file, cross-checking every line. The internal bulletin said only a few stores were affected, but the shipping summary I downloaded earlier showed something else. I reviewed the shipment list again. Not 3 stores, not 5. At least 17 locations received the same product code. 17. I leaned back in my chair. The office felt unusually quiet. Outside the glass wall, everything looked normal. But if this truth comes out before the company goes public, the stock price will crash. Investors will pull out. 40 years of reputation could collapse in days. That's why they needed a name to take the blame. A personal mistake sounds lighter than a system-wide cover-up. I stood and walked down to the warehouse behind the old store where I worked during college. The smell of cardboard and wooden pallets was still familiar. There's a small corner where my father used to stand with me every weekend, back when he personally inspected inventory. He taught me how to count each box, how to record carefully to avoid mistakes. I placed my hand on a pallet, the rough wood under my fingertips. "You taught me to be honest," I said quietly, though no one was there to hear it. I remembered him bending down to pick up a box that fell from a forklift. He once told me, even a small mistake can cost a customer's trust. I came back to the present. The spreadsheet was still open on my laptop. The numbers were emotionless, unbiased. If I signed the responsibility statement, the story ends as a personal error. The company still goes public on time. The family keeps its image. But the truth behind those numbers will be buried. I closed the laptop and slipped it into my bag. I will not submit a statement taking the blame. Not because I want to make this bigger, but because those numbers are not small. And if anyone thinks I will continue being the sacrifice like before, they've forgotten one thing. I grew up between these shelves, and I know the price of integrity is far higher than $3.2 million. I didn't go home that night. I went back to my desk, opened my personal laptop, and began gathering everything I had. The spreadsheet of 17 stores, the estimated damages of $3.2 million, the backup data before and after it was altered, the 2:14 a.m. timestamp. I organized it into an independent report without the company logo, without accusatory language. Just data, numbers, and sequence of events. Each line I wrote was short, no emotion, no blame. I know that if I turn this into a personal fight, it will be dismissed as family conflict. But if I put numbers that don't lie on the table, someone will have to answer. I sent a copy of the report to each board member through their personal emails, bypassing the internal system that locked me out. In the subject line, I wrote only, "Request for urgent meeting before stock offering." Nothing more. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. Rachel. Her voice was already breaking in the first sentence. "You're ruining me." I stood by the window, looking down at the parking lot as it slowly emptied. "You ruined yourself when you agreed to alter the data," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but this time I didn't soften the sentence. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then Rachel spoke more quietly. "Dad said we just need to get through this round. After that, everything will be fine." "Temporary," I replied. "It's only temporary." I hung up before the conversation could circle back into its old loop. I reopened my email, opened. Instead of sending an accusation, I chose a different way. I attached all the data, the spreadsheets, the backups, the timestamps, and sent them to a business reporter at the local newspaper who had written several times about our family company. Not a single accusatory sentence, no commentary, just data related to the recent recall, your decision. I sat still for a few minutes, watching the screen fade to black. My phone vibrated. A reply from a board member appeared. "We have received your report. An emergency meeting will be held tomorrow morning. Your attendance is mandatory." I read that line again. Tomorrow morning, no more persuasion in a family conference room, no more back covering between two sisters. Tomorrow, everything would be placed before people who don't carry the Carter name. I closed my laptop. For the first time since the news broke, I no longer felt pushed around. But tomorrow, when the conference room door opens, I know I won't just be facing the board. I'll be facing my own family, under a light they never wanted turned on. The next morning, the conference room on the 12th floor was more crowded than usual. This was no longer a family discussion. The full board was present. 2 attorneys sat at the far end of the table. The large screen lit up with the company logo and the words "emergency meeting." I walked in with my personal laptop. No one invited me to sit, but I pulled out a chair myself. Rachel sat to my father's right. She wasn't wearing heavy makeup like usual. My father kept his familiar, calm expression, but his hands were pressed flat against the table. The board chair nodded at me. "You have 5 minutes." I stood and connected my laptop to the screen. I didn't begin with accusations. I didn't mention family. I opened the original log and zoomed in on the 2:14 a.m. timestamp. Then I switched to the edited version, the 2 images side by side. "This is the data before it was altered," I said. "This is after." I pointed out the differences, pointed out the 17 stores, the $3.2 million figure, no adjectives, no emotion. My father shifted in his seat. Rachel stared at the table. The truth doesn't always need shouting, it just needs light. I moved to the final slide, the comparison of the financial filing timeline for the stock offering. The timestamp aligned with the data edit. I stood up and looked directly at the board members. "Ladies and gentlemen, there are 2 reports on this screen. One is a lie that could put you in the crosshairs of the Securities and Exchange Commission after the IPO. The other is the truth that allows us to survive." I turned to my father, my voice tightening. "Do you want me to sign to save Rachel, or do you want me to stay silent so we all risk prison?" This time I will not be the hero cleaning up your mess." Seeing the shock on my father's face and the silence around the table, I knew I had crossed a line I couldn't step back over. If you've watched this far, what do you feel about Madeline's choice? Leave an emoji that shows your reaction? Or tell me, do you choose family or truth? The room was silent. The projector hummed steadily. I took the name tag out of my coat pocket, the small metal plate engraved with integrity first. I walked to the head of the table and placed it directly in front of my father. The sound of metal against wood echoed clearly in the quiet room. He looked down at the name tag, said nothing. Rachel clenched her hands, but she didn't object. A board member spoke first. "We will suspend the stock offering until the internal investigation is complete," he said, "and we need an independent review." No one mentioned firing me. No one asked me to leave. My father finally spoke, his voice lower. "This is an internal matter," he said, but this time the words didn't carry weight. The board chair shook his head. "Not anymore." I sat down. My heart was still racing, but my hands were steady. I hadn't won. No one had admitted fault, but the plan to push me forward as the sacrifice had stopped. Rachel looked at me for the first time since the meeting began. Her eyes no longer accusing, not grateful either, just an empty space between two people who had grown used to me fixing things. I picked up the name tag and placed it in front of me. Integrity first. This time it wasn't just a slogan on a wall. It sat in the middle of the table, where no one could pretend not to see it. The meeting ended in a heavy, leaden atmosphere. People broke into small groups, whispering. I didn't stay. I carried my laptop and name tag down to the back parking lot, where employees usually smoke during breaks. The wind was stronger than in the morning. I stood by my car, about to open the door, when I heard high heels running across concrete. "Madeline!" I turned. Rachel stood a few steps away. No boardroom distance, no lights pointed at our faces, just two sisters in an empty parking lot. She walked closer, arms wrapped tightly around herself as if steadying her balance. "I changed the data," she said, her voice rough. "Dad said we just needed to adjust the approval timestamp. Just one line. No one would check closely." "I was scared," Rachel continued. "If the IPO was delayed, everything would fall on me. Dad said I didn't have enough experience to survive another scandal." She stopped, eyes red, not loud crying, the quiet tears she always tried to hide as a child. "Did you think about me?" I asked. The question came out short and direct. Rachel lowered her head. I'm used to you fixing things." That sentence froze me for a few seconds. It wasn't an apology, not a defense either. It sounded like a habit that had existed so long, it became automatic. She wiped the corner of her eye. "I didn't think it would get this big. I just thought we'd get through it, then fix it later." I looked around the parking lot, cars lined up neatly. A company doesn't collapse because of one mistake. It collapses when people believe mistakes can be hidden. "There will be an internal investigation," I said. "You have to tell them the truth." Rachel nodded. No argument, no plea for me to keep this quiet. I had enough data to take this further. I could send everything to authorities. I knew that. But standing in front of me wasn't the marketing director. It was the little girl who used to hide behind me when she was afraid. I opened my car door. "You have to take responsibility," I said. "This time I won't fix it." Rachel didn't touch me, didn't grab my hand. She just stood there watching as I sat in the driver's seat. I didn't file criminal charges, not out of weakness, but because justice doesn't always require a sentence to exist. But from that moment on, I knew one thing. If Rachel chose silence before the board, I would hold nothing back. The internal investigation findings were released 2 weeks later. No dramatic press conference, just an official notice sent to shareholders and employees. The stock offering was postponed indefinitely. The company would undergo a comprehensive independent audit, and my father, CEO for 20 years, would voluntarily step down to focus on restructuring. Rachel wasn't fired, but she was demoted, moved into a role without final approval authority. The decision didn't make her collapse in front of others, but I saw the change in how she walked down the hallway. Slower, quieter. I was called into the boardroom again. "We would like you to serve
Therefore,
as
the
interim
motion is
CEO,"
denied.
the board chair said.
We
"You
need a
understand the
revised
system.
strategy
At
by
the
the
office
next quarterly
building,
review.
reflecting the afternoon sunlight. The Carter Fresh Market sign was still there. My family built it from a single small store. I used to feel proud wearing the Carter name on my badge. But power isn't just the chair at the head of the table. If I take this position, would I start believing that a bigger goal justifies overlooking smaller things? Would I someday tell someone else, we just need to get through this? I placed my hand on the table. "I will not accept the interim CEO position," I said. A few people exchanged glances. "I'm willing to support as an independent advisor," I continued. "I want to rebuild the control processes from the outside, not from the executive seat." No one objected. Maybe they understood that after everything, the company needed distance. I walked out of the boardroom for the second time that month without a new title. Just my decision. My father packed up over the weekend. He didn't say much. We crossed paths once in the hallway. He nodded, a brief acknowledgement shorter than any argument we'd had before. Everything ended not with the judge's gavel, but with the quiet sound of my father's office door closing for the last time. No dramatic scenes, just positions shifting, plans paused, numbers disclosed correctly, but the cost wasn't small. My family no longer gathers for Sunday dinners like before. Rachel and I talk less, but more honestly. There's no longer an assumption that I will fix things. I keep the old name tag in the desk drawer of my new office, a small room outside headquarters. It's no longer a slogan on a wall. It's a boundary I set for myself. And this time I won't let anyone redefine that boundary for me. I left headquarters one afternoon with no reporters waiting. No cameras, no applause, just a small box with a few personal items and the name tag I'd kept through my 20s. My father sent me an email 3 days later. No demand, no command, just one line. "I hope you're okay." I read that sentence longer than I want to admit. He had never written to me like that before. Rachel started over in a lower position. She no longer signed off on campaigns, no longer appeared in major strategy meetings. Once, I saw her sitting in a new employee training session, taking notes like an intern. She didn't avoid my eyes, but she didn't look to me for support either. We're no longer the family of loud dinners and easy laughter. There are silences that won't be easy to fill. I didn't win completely. I lost the familiar image of my family. I lost the feeling of being someone's unconditional safety net. But I'm no longer the sacrifice. I hung the name tag on the wall in my small advisory office, not to remind others, but to remind myself. A boundary isn't betrayal, it's how a person keeps from being pulled into things they no longer believe are right. Some days I still think about the old warehouse, about my father bending down to count each box, about Rachel running after me between the shelves. Family doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. Honesty can make you stand alone in a crowded room, but standing alone is still better than bowing your head for something you didn't do. This story was created with the support of AI and edited by a human, inspired by real-life situations to offer reflection and emotion. It does not encourage anyone to copy the actions in this story, as every circumstance carries its own choices and consequences. If there's one thing I keep after all of this, it's this. You can love your family deeply and still protect your own truth. Sometimes a boundary doesn't make you lose anyone, it just reveals who is truly willing to stay when the lights turn on. If you've stayed until the end, thank you. I know your time is valuable. Let me know which state you're watching from. I read every comment and appreciate the stories you share. If this story touched you in any way, hit like so I know these conversations about family and boundaries matter. And if you want to hear more stories about difficult but necessary choices, subscribe and turn on notifications. You're not just watching a video, you're part of a very real conversation. Thank you for being here.